Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim, Rambam, Hilchos Geneva, Prakim Zayin, Ches, and Tes. Perek Zayin will begin telling us the halachas regarding weights, regarding measures that may not be inaccurate. We will have towards the end of this chapter also the prohibition of what we call hasagas gevul, literally meaning moving the boundary of your neighbor. In other words, taking some of his land, God forbid, and then putting it in yours. And we're going to have a link that the Torah makes, that the Rambam emphasizes between this mitzvah of having accurate weights and the Yitzias Mitzrayim, both in the positive, and God forbid that whoever denies this mitzvah to a certain level is denying the whole Yesod of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Perek Zayin has 12 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam, "Hashoikel lachaveiroi b'mishkolos chaseiros min hamishkol sheyiskimu olav b'nei oisa hamadina." If a person is using weights that are less than the weights that are accepted by people in that country, I just give you an example. We're living here in America. In America, we don't use kilos, we use pounds. Speaking about the times where there was actually a mishkol, there was a weight that weighed a pound. And whenever you're buying or selling something of that weight, you're counter measuring it with that weight. If a person is using an inaccurate weight, what are they doing? A person is going to come buy a pound of merchandise. They're not going to get a pound. They're going to get a little bit less. Or if a person similarly, if you're using a measure, right? People have yards, people have feet, meters, whatever the measure is. So you have a rope, you have a measuring rope that, so to say, is of that type, but it's inaccurate. So that if you use that, let's begin. And where do we have this negative commandment in Parshas Kedoshim? Do not act deceitfully, right? With regarding to judgments, clearly bamidah or bamishkal. So midah is a rope, mishkal is weights. Misura is a very small liquid measure. We'll see later, actually, there's a machlekes in Gersois, whether it's a 33rd or a 36th of a loik. Even that amount of inaccuracy is not accepted. Halacha beis. That is considered an act of geneva, and we are learning, unlike a gazlan who's not ashamed of doing this act in public. Here, this guy is hiding his theft. It's geneva. Normally for geneva, if you're caught, not because you admit it, but by edim, you have to pay kefal, you have to pay double. Here, the only thing you have to do is you have to pay him back to that which you took from him, midah or mishkal. And the reason is because halachically you're considered a gazlan. Another din, the ein loikin alav zeh. Why? Because since you're obligated to make financial restitution, even though you're not chayav to pay a knas, very fact that you're chayav to make financial restitution, that's why, that's the klal, you won't be chayav malchus. Halachigim. Now we're going to something that we don't find elsewhere. Now the Rambam begins by telling us you may not use a faulty mishkal, a faulty midah. I get it. Now we're not speaking about someone who's using it to deceive his fellow. Simply owning it in their house. That person is also violating a negative commandment. And this is a pasuk in Parshas Kisei, where it says, don't have in your pocket, don't have in your domain 2 sets of weights. People need to have chamber pots. There was no running water. So some of these weights were formed in a way that it could be used for a chamber pot. Imagine, you're not even planning to use it. You're using it for something that who would ever use a chamber pot to use it later for a weight? Asur. This guy certainly won't be using it. Nevertheless, since you own it, someone might not know that it's inaccurate. and they'll need to use something for a weight. It's going to look like a weight, even though it was used for something, that's the bizoyan. They'll clean it. Who knows? And the yimdad. That's how far we have to go away. Even owning it is prohibited. And here, for this lav, it ain't like an alav zeh, because it ain't by myself. Because you're just having it in your home. You're not doing anything. Halacha dal. If you're living in a society and where you have inspectors that they come and they weigh your weights, and if it's the right one, they put a certain governmental seal on it, and this one that you are having in your home, which is inaccurate, doesn't have that seal because it's inaccurate. And Rambam gives a reason. The reason why the Torah does not allow you to have bikischa is because someone might use it. So the Rambam here is paskening that if we can be confident that no one will use it, then you can have it in your house. You're not going to use it. You're using, people did not throw things away. Because no one will end up using it because there isn't a choisem. Similarly, if you have a coin and there was a certain damage in the coin. Now we're going to learn later if the coin is damaged in the center. Here we're speaking about what? That if someone who has a coin, Yakir, that's damaged from the side, one might not notice that. And I might use that coin even though it doesn't have the right weight. So lo yaseno mishkol beina mishkolois. Don't use it as a mishkol. Sometimes people would use a sela as a weight because every sela had a standard weight. This sela is faulty. And not only may you not use it, but just like we had before when it comes to weights and measures, that even v'lo yizrekenu bein giru toisov, don't cast it amongst your scrap metal. Don't drill a hole through it and make it into a piece of jewelry for your son. Why? For the same fear we had above, because people did use Saloim coins as a counterweight. And you know that this is faulty. So what do you need to do? You have to grind it. That's it. Cut it into small pieces, pulverize it, do something in which it is completely destroyed, never allowing anyone, even the shoygik, to use it as a weight. Now, if someone accidentally will use it, right? If this seller is so chaseda, it's so reduced that it's mamish half of the normal size. In other words, the difference, my friends, between a seller and a half a seller is so obvious, no one will mistake it. Then you kayim. Again, you're not using it, God forbid. Of course, that's allowed, but you can keep it in your property. Now, furthermore, if it's a little bit less than a half, again, you have to destroy it. Why? Because people would also use a half a seller. Who remembers what a half a seller is? A shekel. People would use a shekel also as a weight. It's exactly half. Exactly half a stack a shekel. If it's off that exact, then again, it's an inaccurate weight. Right? Now, if it's a bit more than a half, that you can rectify it. How do you rectify it? Grind it down until it's exactly a half is a coin for itself. Now here we come to a very important rule. When we learned in the beginning of this chapter, this whole mitzvah, that you may not have a weight or a measuring stick that's off. It may not be off, Yakir, even a millimeter. However, when it comes to transactions, we're going to learn a lot about the din of a oina'ah. The word oina'ah in the context of transactions, it means if there was a overpaying or underpaying. And the halacha is that if that inaccuracy of payment for something is less than a sixth, since roif people are moichel, it's tolerated. Not advocated, tolerated. When it comes to a weight, if I have a weight that's supposed to be a pound, and it's off, and I know, amashahu, asur midoiraisa. Transactions, there's a greater amount of tolerance. We'll speak out at the end of this page. If we have time, it's short prakim today, a beautiful sikh of the Rebbe explaining what's so serious, and it's mamish that serious. So if you have a coin, and the coin is off by less than a sixth, then you may never use it as a weight, but you can keep the coin to do business with it. You may never use it. This is a very important cloud. Now, why are you allowed to do transactions with it? Because the rule is, unlike what we had in halacha daled, if you have a coin that has a hole in the center, less people will be fooled by it, because you see a hole in the center. Nevertheless, also limkar oisai, you cannot give it either to a harag. A harag means someone who, God forbid, will even kill, to a mafioso, or lacharam. Charam means a guy that's not going to kill others, but he's known to be a ganav. Why? People that impose fear on others, we're speaking about bad people. What happens is that when they do business with other people, they can give this faulty seller. That's the way of the world. And the guy doesn't want to have anything negative. So they'll make believe as if they didn't see there's a hole in it and be makabalit. In other words, people that are bad people still get away using it. Don't give them that opportunity. However, no, it's giving it to a harag, giving it to a charim, you can't. But if some coins' lack of size is so evident, a hole in the middle, that you could use for jewelry. It's interesting how it was common for boys to wear necklaces. All right, halacha zayin. In the Haredi world, they're very careful in all these things. Okay, halacha oisa adam midoisav sa. Now, the Rambam is speaking about something else. There are standard size measures, and we want to make sure that we never create a scenario where even b'shoigeg, we think we're selling one amount, but we take out another measure that's so close to it, even though let's say it's less means the lekeach lost, or more, the moichet gave more, where they won't even chap. So we only allow for certain measures to exist, and each one is very off the other. You can make a saw. The next measure down is a chatzi saw, which is half. The next measure down is a half of a half roiva. The next measure down is a kav, a chatzi kav, a roiva kav, a chatzi roiva. And the smallest here in solid measures is a shminis roiva. What may you not do? 2 kavs, a measure of 2 kavs. Because if you want to sell 2 kavs, we only have halachically a kav measure, and you fill it up twice. But you don't have one that has 2 kav, because that's which is a kavu mechzeh. And the difference between 2 and 1.5 is so small that people might confuse it. All of this is based on not having something in your house that might be even b'shoigeg used to sell something or to buy something using the wrong measure. The largest midas halach that we have is a hin. Right? The hin is the 12 loik. Chatzi ahin, revius ahin, loig, chatzi aloig, urevius, ushminis, and ve'echod b'shmoina b'shminis. If you remember the sugya in Soita about gaiva, so that's the expression that we find, an eighth of an eighth, 64th. That lashon is pasha there because in the measures there was such a measure. Now here's a kash. By the lach, you can't even have 2 kav because it's close to the kav and a half. In the midas halach, we have one measure that measured a quarter of a hin, and one that measured a third of a hin. They're very similar. Why are we not chayish that accidentally they're going to mistake and use one for the other? Even though taka, the logic should have been the reason is and we not that long ago, however, we should remember everything that we're learning. We learned that when it comes to the flour offerings that were brought, the menachos that come along with karbanos. So you have the 3 general measures, right? And you have, depending on the size of the animal, and you have a half a hin, a third of a hin, and a fourth, both of the oil and of the wine. So since this is the way they made, the Eibishter gave a mitzvah, so therefore they had it from the Beis HaMikdash, so we can have it. No one is doing it the Mason. We're not going to be more frum than the Torah over here. Right. Halach Echad, Hanoisav Reisin in Yisrael, or if you're doing business with Roivet Kichavim, makes absolutely no difference. Im Madad Oishakal B'chaser, Oiver Aloisase, And like we mentioned, you have to pay, you have to compensate. Not kefil, it's called gezela, but you have to give the difference back. Also, not only did the Rambam begin Hilchos Geneva, that echad Yisrael ve'echad oived kichavim, tricking someone. Tricking means generally you're doing a good transaction, but there's some trick over here. Elo yidagdik imoy. As it says, this is a pasuk in Bahar. V'chishev im koinehu. That's the pasuk in Bahar referring to Kal v'chomer to an oived kichavim she'ena kavush tachas yodecha. And Baharehu Oimer, we're going now to a pasuk in Kiseitze. Kisoy avas Hashem elikecha kolois. This is an abomination. Toyeva kolois aval. Okay, you should know that the Torah does not use the word toyeva that common. It's used in the context of aroyas or certain of the aroyas, right? Mishkav zechor. You have toyeva for this and appreciate this. This is not your normal ganef. The Torah doesn't use toyeva by a ganef or by a gazlan. Toyeva means I'm using a mishkol that's inaccurate. Halachates. So you have these surveyor ropes, if that's the word in English. If you knowingly tricked your friend, you violated the law. And this pasuk in the Kedoshim, bamida means midas hakarka. Who in pasuk said that loisase avel bamishpat, meaning mishpat karka. No, it's don't act deceitfully. The Rambam is saying what you may not do. You may not act deceitfully regarding any type of measure, land measure, weight measure, measuring metaltalin, and even again mida haketano. That is even only a difference in the size of a misura, which is the smallest liquid measure. And here again, I just want you to know that in this misura, there's a machlekes in Gersois and Chazal. It's 1/33 or 1/36 of a loin. Halacha. Sometimes you have a group. Now, guys, it's a very general statement. It can be yakir partners. It can be even in kachin. People come Pesach, they get an animal together. It can be neighbors that live in the same chatzah. There are different types of chabudas, and we're going to give them two classes. Some chavra are not negdagdikin to begin with. Everyone wants to get the right amount, but they're not negdagdik. We're not talking about them. If they were megala, that they want everything to be exact. So then, or, one second, that if they are exchanging, if they are medagdik, and they're making an exchange when it comes to kachim, a few people bring a carbon together, and everyone is going to get the same exact amount, or lava mimenu maichel hechserloi, or if people are living, like we said, in the same courtyard, and they, that's the way of the world. You're going to borrow from your neighbor a couple of eggs, this and that. But these are types of people that whatever you borrowed, gesundheit, you have to give me back exactly that amount. So the Rambam says they will be over mishum midanos. If they don't give back exact, they're mamash violating this serious law. Umishum mishkal, umishum minyan. Another detail, and that's very important to know, and I know we're not going to learn this in detail right now, but on Yom Tiv, we allow borrowing if the word halva'a is not used. In Lashon HaKodesh, there's mashil, she'ela, halva'a. You have to know Pasha the language. Halva connotes lizman meruba. Hashileni is lizman muat. And for reasons of Yom Tov, of transactions, and be'ikr b'chlal transactions, even on Shabbos and on Yom Tov, the isuram generally is midrabanan, maybe midivrei Kabbalah. One of the reasons we find in Chazal, why may you not make such a transaction, Shema Yichtlev. Shema, you might end up writing, Shema Yichtlev B'chlal is only if the transaction is long-lasting, or even if it's a loan, it's for a long amount of time, people are afraid they might forget. When a person lends for a very short amount of time, that's called She'ela. B'chlal, people relied, episode memory we have, hopefully, there was less Chasha Shema Yichtlev. All he's pointing out over here, no, this halva is not connected. Aside of the inyan of halva may not be done on Yom Tov, once everyone is very medagdek, then we enact this very strict din. Normally, again, by sales, there's a tolerance of a less than a sixth. There's a tolerance of a less of a, no one should do it lachatchila to trick, but once it happens, there's a din of mechila, mamish, but not by weights, not by measures. Or if I'm bartering I'm giving you eggs and I want eggs back, it has to be exact the same amount. Now, halacha Yud Aleph is going, you can say it's connected, obviously, that I'm going to put it in the same chapter. It's about accuracy. We're going to go a little bit off the weights. We're speaking now about hasagas gavul. Now, the word hasagas gavul is a generic term that's used, that is applied today, b'shem hamushal, for many things. Like if you have a business and someone else is opening up a business that you are afraid might infringe, might take away your customers, we use the term hasagas gavul, correctly so. But the source of hasagas gavul in the Torah is kipshutai hasagas gavul. So now, when you buy a piece of property, it's registered somewhere, and even if your neighbor is going to move the fence today with technology, you'll be able to discover that at some point. It didn't go that way in those days. Think about it. You buy a piece of property, even on your contract, some properties have natural boundaries. You can write it down. Some of them didn't have natural boundaries. So the Uben buys a house. Where does his property begin and end? His neighbor is Shimon, the fence to Shimon, the fence to Levi. And if any of them, God forbid, to go at night, to go when the guy is traveling, they move the fence, that's called hasagas gavul. And here also, there's no oina. It's like mishkalos, that the smallest amount is also halach Yud Aleph. Hamasik gavul re'eh. We're speaking literally moving a fence, meaning vehichlis mitchum chaveira mitoin tchum shaloi. In other words, I'm taking, God forbid, Reuven is taking some of Shimon's land and he's making it his. How does he do it? I'll tell you how. He moves the fence a little bit in Shimon's property. And even if it's Maloi Etzba, point is, it's less than a 6, it's less than 1,000. I don't care the small amount. If Bechazaka Asa means if he did it openly, he's called a Gazlan. If he did it when no one was watching, it's called a Ganav. And we already learned in the beginning of Achaz Geneva, the Iker, nafkamina between a Ganav and a Gazlan will be not when they are moide, but if Edom come, chayv kefil or not. Te'im be'eretz Yisrael hisek hagvul. Not only are you over on one lav, you're over on 2 lavin, which is number one, the lav of Geneva and Gezelu, which is not connected to the Holy Land, it's everywhere. And also, ubalav shel leisasik gevul reyach. And you should know, interestingly, that Rambam is quoting a pasuk from Parsha Shoiftim, and we know, ein chayav lav zeh ela be'eretz Yisrael. Because over there, juxtaposed, it says, in other words, doesn't mean b'chutz la'aretz you can do it, but you're even on Geneva and Gezel. And now the Rambam concludes halacha Yud Beis. Kasher onshon shel midos. The punishment, not that we keep the mitzvahs for the reward or refrain from the punishment, but you should know that from the punishment you can see the seriousness of something. The seriousness, the punishment of midos is more than the oynish of aroyos. And by the way, again, to just a chazar that the word toyeva was written, and by all of the aroyos, we have only in few of them the word toyeva. Shazam aroyos, we're speaking about aroyos where both parties are consenting, is only beinoy or bein hamakim. And not that we have the right to violate God's love to us, but God is forgiving. God, there's a certain amount of tolerance. When it comes to midos, beinoy or bein chaveri. Now, these are the words that Chazal say. If they deny mitzvahs midos, because you should know that in the Chumash, the Torah makes that link. And what's the importance of Yitzias Mitzrayim? The Rambam writes something which is very rare. Shehi tchilas hatzivui. Who knows what that means? Not that I know more than you know. I learned it before. So they bring tchilas hatzivui means that when Hashem gave us Aseres Hadibros, right? How many Memorei Chasidus do we have in that? You would have thought Hashem would have said, Hashem did not write that. And the fact, now why, that's a good kasha, but the fact that Hashem links Yitzias Mitzrayim with the beginning, we are using that link for our mitzvah. We're learning about the law of having faulty weights. The Torah links it to Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's how important it is. You're koifet in that which is the beginning of all the commandments. And now in the positive, and here again, what's the mile of being moide b'yitzias Mitzrayim? And the obvious question is, I know that the Torah makes that link, but what's the higoyin? What's the logic of this connection? And what does it mean, you're moide or you're koifet? What does that mean even? Koifer b'mitzvahs midos. Didn't we begin to state it that midos yakir is geneva? or gzela. Okay, so you know what say? Kol hagoizel, kol hagoynev. We don't say that. So I know there's the classic. I want you to know that there's a sicha in Lekutei Sichas Chelik Chav Zayin Kedoshim Beis on page 149. Gavaldik. The Nekuda is like this: that the Rebbe brings the famous Rambam in the beginning regarding God's hashgacha and the punishment for our bechira. How would they reconcile? Focusing on how did God punish the Mitzrayim when we were destined to be in Be'eretz Loy Lohem, and we're going to be slaves to a foreign nation. That's the famous question. And the Nekuda that the Rebbe brings, B'shitas Rambam, is that even though everything that happens was decreed to happen, the doer chose to do it, and the punishment is for his bad choice, even though the result of his bad choice would have happened anyways. We learned to Shavuos night over here. Because regardless, the result would have been the same. Why are people punished? Because they made a bechira, they made the bad choice. The result in the world would have been the same. They're being punished for something that they did internally. And then the point that the Rebbe makes is that what's unique about midos and this koifer of the midos that the Rambam is speaking about, if a person uses a faulty measure, they're like any other ganav. What's unique of measures is what we learned in the beginning of the chapter, halacha gimel, you can't even leave it in your house. If I have a faulty weight in my house, I'm not ganvening yet, but it's showing that I potentially am going to ganva. So this concept that punishments of the Torah are given by God, not for that which you did, but for your inner choice of doing bad, that is mamish connected to Yetzias Mitzrayim, because why were they punished, the Egyptians? We were going to be slaves anyway. No one said you have to be the slave master. The roya bechira, the evil inside the person, is for what we're punished, and that's something unique. Not the way people think, the people who, God forbid, are not yet knowledgeable with the concept of the Baal Shem Tov, the Hashgacha Pratis. They think, oh, you're punished because you did bad in the world. That would have happened anyways. It's about your choice. The Plinius, even independent of the Hezek, that's unique what we find by Midas. No, nowhere else do you find that you get punished for a Kavanah. Where's the exception? By Midas. By everyone. That's what we learn. And Stam, the Rebbe explains what's taka, why are we so medagdik here more than any other thing? Because here, when a person steals, he's going in one direction. Aganif, terrible direction. It's clear. At least he's honest in his kavanah to steal. When a person is using a measure to steal, what's the whole action of using a measure? Honesty. I'm doing mishpat. You're using mishpat to ganva. It's like they legislated sins before the Doira Mabul, which is why they had the Mabul. People always sinned with Aroyas, but they made it legal. They made it legalizing Rahman al-Aslan, what's going on in the world today. That's a much greater, because it becomes the law. You're using the law to go against the law. Okay, Atkan, and let's Ayin Sham more. It's a Moide Dikasich. Pedek Ches is the same that we learned in Pedek Zayin, but now on the positive. How beautiful is that? The mitzvah, the words will be L'tzadik hamoisnayim, to constantly rectify it, to make them accurate. And the lashon is L'tzadik hamoisnayim b'amidas yafa. And now we're going to learn a Gavaldik thing. There's a din Torah, and then there's a rabbinic how it's applied. Even midoiraisa, when people are using a weight to make a sale, there's an obligation to tip the scale in the favor of the purchaser. Did you know that? Very small amount. How that's done, we'll learn how the Chachamim said to do it. Okay, Pedek Ches has 20 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Says the Rambam, mitzvah sasei, letzadek hamoisnayim v'hamishkolos v'amidos yafa. Uledaydik becheshbon d'shas asiyasim. When you're making, we're not speaking about doing the sale. When you're making those weights, to be very careful. The passion, but also in kedoshim. Moisnei tzedek, avnei tzedek, eifas tzedek, hin tzedek yelachem. Tzedek, 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 all about exact, correct. Chem miras hakarka, tzorik l'daydik becheshbon d'shichas hakarka. First of all, you have to know how to measure. Making surveys on land is not so simple. Today, with the technology, you drive in LA, you have these people in the middle of the traffic with those laser things. It's a big chacham. You have to know geometry, how to make it properly. And what we remember a little bit from Eidovin is that even the ropes that they would use, imagine you cannot use the same rope winter, summer. You have to either buy and sell winter or buy and sell summer, because ropes, they become bigger, smaller, depending to the weather. Like karkam is a very expensive herb that has a good scent. In other words, there's no aina over here, there's no tolerance, there's no mechila when it comes to using a measure to affect a transaction. It has to be meduyev. Halacha, the bays will be the few exceptions. When you have an irrigation ditch that's going through other people's property, all right, and people would walk aside it. That's a great picture. People would walk aside it. The owners of the fields have a certain tolerance of allowing people even to walk a little bit into their property. The halacha is that everyone has the right to walk daladamas on the sides. Those daladamas don't have to be, we're not speaking about going from daladamas to heyamas. That's not what we mean. We mean it doesn't have to be exact. So you can make a normal, approximation. And similarly, that's even more. When in many rivers in the Holy Land were very shallow, and the way boats with schayna would go from Mimakayim Lamakayim, of course, on the rivers, how would they navigate those boats? They would have people that would have ropes attached to these boats, and they would be on the land, and they would schlep the boats. We're not speaking about QE2, we're speaking about little boats. So they needed a road on both sides of the Nahar. You don't mention at all. Was anything that Tzarchei Harabim Tluim Bahem, so there's a Tzarchei Harabim to have the shipping routes open. When you're measuring the land, not only is the surveyor's cord, that's the word, the cord is accurate, so shkoyach, you have to know how to be honest with that. And to someone else, so either buy and sell using that rope on the season of the rain or on the season of the heat. Now that's only when you're using a material rope that taka expands and contracts. But if you're using a rod, the rod doesn't change. Or if you're using a shalshelish barzel, we're not speaking about something that can become rusty. That's a whole different parsha. But the normal other iron, then ain't bekach klum, because they don't change summer winter. Halacha dal. Ain't
even iron does no metal.
Huh?
Metal in the folds.
Metal does not. It does not. Who told you that? No. Halacha dal ain't nice and mishkalis leave deal. Now what may you not use? You can't use iron. You can't use oiferes lead. You can't use veloy sha'ar mini matches ke'elu, which are similar to iron lead. We're speaking about these two examples. Because they rust quicker than others. And just to appreciate, rusting is not just dirty on your hands. The metal rusts, which means some of it becomes deficient. You could make it from tzechiyach sela, that's an English marble, or you could make it a rod of glass, or even shoyham. He touches here in the Chayenu with diamond. They didn't have diamonds then, but it was some very it's anything that is stark. Ein oisen. He doesn't mention gold. I think they Pasha didn't use it. Okay, halacha hey. Now it's similar. Guys, when you have the measure kalim that we spoke about in the last chapter, so think about it. You have a measure that the chveis a kav. So let's say I'm the moicher, you're the lekeach. You're paying for a kav of flour. I fill it up. When you fill up a keli, sometimes there is a godish, there's a heap. So they had sticks that they used to go over the top in order to make sure that there isn't an overheat. And those sticks needed, God forbid, not to go into it to steal from the lekeach. So this concept of being specifically careful when it comes to measures goes to that stick. That's halacha. Ein oisen es hanechok. This is the stick used for dry measures, not made out of a gourd because it's very light. Very light means that the moichet is going to lose a little bit. It won't take, the lekeach will get too much. And not out of a heavy metal because it's too heavy. So what should you imagine that we're speaking about little differences? Wood from a zayas, wood from an egoist tree, wood of a sycamore, wood shall eshkiroya v'chayotze bohem. Halacha, that's the exact, not too heavy, not too light. Halacha above. This type of stick may not be made with tzidoi echad kotzev and tzidoi echad aver. It's to be consistent. Because then when the guy uses it to buy, he'll use the side for his advantage. You know, it's anything that could be played around with is also to even own. Another detail. When you would put the stick and you would take off the excess, you can do it very slowly. You can do it very quick. Also it affects. Can't go very slow because when it doesn't take off enough. When you go very slow, the lekeach gets more than he paid for. Too quick because now, halacha zayin. Another thing, where do you store those weights? You have a weight, right? The counter weights. So you have a pound, you have a kilo. If you keep it in a place where it's going to corrode quicker than in other places, you can't keep it in salt because that's what salt does. It's amazing. Salt is a preservative, but it also eats up. It sucks out the liquid. So it makes things smaller. Another thing, when you are selling or buying liquids, it may not be hot while you're making the transaction, because when liquid is hot, guys, it expands a little bit. So the buyer is getting a little bit less when it's going to cool down. We're speaking about mashu. You have to be careful. Even though that difference of this expansion is very, very minute, there's no mechila here. Like we said in the last chapter. Now I know I mentioned there's two girsois. The mida ktana echad, which is that Rambam writes the words mishloisho ushloishim baloik. That Rambam's writing 133. Again, there's a machlokes already in Chazal and girsois. I don't know if there's a machlokes in the Rambam's girsa. Either that Rambam is paskening that the right girsa is 1 of 33. I have to see more, or maybe that others amend the Rambam to 1 and 36. Whatever that. Halacha ches. Moichlei ashoshiyois, people who sell scrap iron. The chayoytze behen. So now we're going into another detail, just to have a picture, Kevan, and that's going to be many halachas. The concept is very easy, that many weights, balances were held in the hand, and you have to just give parts to the keli. So there is the iron, the chain, that everything is hanging from. That has to have a minimum length. Then we're not even speaking about the cross beam over here. But then from that cross beam on both ends, you have another chain that's hanging down. And in many cases, from that chain, they would have pants. The size, the length of these chains are very significant. Because now that we're saying you have to be mamish medagdik b'yosef, there is a certain system that if it's too little or too long, it's not going to get it exact counterweight. And it has to do with what is the schayra for which this balance is going to be used for. The heaviest things that people buy and sell are moichrei ashashiyos, scrap iron. It's going to be big pieces of iron. So divrei chayotze behem notes schayra that has a lot of weight, but you're selling it by weight, and you're using this counterbalance type. So then tzarich liyos chut hamoisnayim, the top chain, the one that sho'oiches hashekel biyadei, should be at least tolaba aver 3 tfachim. Another thing. If you're holding it too low to the ground, when you put your schayra in it, before it levels out, it goes up, it goes down. If you put it too close to the ground, it can hit the ground and bounce back up, even though you can argue, who cares? It's going to get leveled. We don't want that. We want that the whole system should be without any side sibois manipulating the movement of the counterbalance. And you have to hold it above the ground at least 3 tvachim. I'm sorry. It shouldn't bounce off the ground. And another detail, the length of the center pole, there's a center pole, a side of the crossbeam, has to be shnei maser tefach. Halacha 9. Now let's go to schayra that's a little bit smaller. All right, there we go. A little bit lighter than scrap iron. These There, you don't need 3, you need 2. We tolerate smaller. It's still going to get exact. The chut, this is the one above everything. And bahakana, the center beam, and the chutim that come off the crossbar should be 9 tefach. Was 9 shol chendeni and of a balabayis. Here even less. The chut is sufficient for it to be only a tefach, and we see a consistency. Whatever the length of the top is, that's the amount that you have to start off the ground. The goyim in art tefach. Here we have a good picture over here on the Zoom. Thank you. And let's go Alacha Yudal. If you have cables from where balance is hung, these are schoides that are very delicate and very expensive. They have to be at least 3 finger breadths long, and they have to be again above the ground 3 boys. It's all that these numbers are always the same. There, it doesn't matter. Now we're moving on to Nu. Halach Yud Beis. And like we mentioned in the introduction, this is the topic of this chapter. It's good to know this. That Midoi Raisa, when you make a sale, after you followed all of these rules, you understand that there's no mechila, you have to make the biggest effort, have everything exact. Now there's another thing. The moicher has to give something extra to the lekeach. Halach Yud Beis. Minayin shechayiv hamoicher lahachriya lalekeach be'esher shokoloi. He must tip the balance. Now, I want to say, when I use the words tip the balance, the rabbinic application is to actually tip the balance. Midoi Raisa, he has to add something. All of that is almost like in the Torah, to make sure that you didn't trick him. Just think a very small amount.
That was the opposite. Now we teach.
So I can't say now the lekeach tips. The Meichel is doing you a favor, and I'm going to get Shneimar, as it says, Evan Shleima v'ot tzedek. Now, hold on. If it's already Shleima, isn't that superfluous? If it's Shleima, everything is exact. The word v'ot tzedek, Amra Torah, it's a doiraisa. Tzaddik mishalach v'ten loy. And you know how beautiful it is? This is consistent. You know, the Rebbe's famous sikha about the 3 things, tzedakah. How tzedakah is not called chesed. That was the whole word, right? Torah, tefillah, tzedakah. How each one is not properly translated in English. But it's tzedek, but chesed. That's the meaning of tzedakah here. Not you're doing a handout. But not only is it shleima, your mom is going to be correct by giving him a little bit more. And the Chachamim said you do it by tipping the scales. How much do you have to tip? It's a very small amount. But this guarantees that if it was inaccurate, the lekeach was not tricked. The kama, balach, 1%. By yavesh, what is that? A quarter, right? 1/4%. Now, why do we need to have a ketzad? I don't know. But the Rambam gives numbers here. The I don't see what the Rambam added over here, but okay, that's the percent. That what? This concept that the moicher has to give something extra to the lekeach. That's that's when people are looking at the scale. Oh, I'm sorry. When the scale is exact, you add, that's what you add by giving a percent, by giving a quarter. But now that Rambam says there are certain places, that's the Semitic, that they decided we're not going to add by adding something. We're actually going to tip the scale. If that is the way they do it, chayiv lachrir like tefach. Wow. Now, that's a lot, right? Depends what you're selling. Depends how much it's worth. And a chanami. The stomach, that was all included in the price. The point is that whatever it ended up being, it's not that the moicher lost all of that profit, because people understood there's going to be a hachra'ah, but it made sure that when it comes to how much did you buy, you for sure got that what you bought. I bought a pound, you're getting the pound. Halacha tezvav. Ho yeshakol yasalitrin. Lo yomer lo yishkol achas ve'achas v'hachra. Everyone a tefach, which will make a sum total of a little bit less. In other words, the lekeach would rather you make. You have to know how these things work. The lekeach would have preferred sell me the merchandise not in one weight, not in one time. Break it up, and every time make the stefach. He'll end up with more. The moicher, even when the minig is to be machlia, he can. Don't forget, guys, you're selling the right number. You already make sure that the measures are okay. This is an add-on. Even when the minig is a tefach, the moicher can do it in a way where it's the most advantageous. It's the least hecher. Halacha tazay. Makom shenahagu lamoid bidaka. When people use small measures, so then lo yomad begas. Begasa lo yomad bedaka. Limchoik. They make sure everything that's sold, you have this, like we spoke about before in halacha, hay, that they used to use this stick to level, then lo yidgoish. And
what's the stick for? If you have something that's 1 pound of flour, it's a bowl.
In other words, like this. Today, when you go to the market, you buy 5 pounds of flour, lamashim. Everything is done with machines. It's very honest today, unless there's a gana for making the machines. But then they had every store. They had measures. They had that. They never sold the kale.
So it's a different type of measure. It's not the scale. It's a
no. It's a measure. It's a measure. Exactly. It's a measure that the moicher would have. We're going to learn about. You have to clean the measure because sometimes when you poured it out, not everything went out. The lekech came with his own bag, but the lekech would not have the measures. So when you're using the measure and there's a price for the measure. So if the minig is to have it heat, you have to sell it heat. I'm sure they paid more. If the minig is to sell it exact, you have to follow that minig. Even though the lekech is saying, no, I'm going to pay you extra because we're afraid it won't be exact. We don't do mechila here. When it comes to measures, we want to make sure the measure was correct. If the minig was that here, when you buy the pound, whatever the measure is, you charged more and you heaped it. Even though the purchaser is saying, no, don't give me a heap, I'll pay you less. You don't do that. Mechila is for the value that you're paying. Measures, that's the concept. You want to make sure that the measure is exact. There's something called inflation. So how does inflation work today? I'll tell you how it works today. You're getting the same amount and you're paying more money. Or one of the ways they dealt with inflation is that they would change the size of the measures. They would change the size of it. They keep the price the same. They were very careful that people get freaked out when they hear the price change. Happens a lot today. They don't change the price, but the bag became smaller. So whenever such changes were made, you cannot make it. It has to always be a sixth or less. Shtus, this idea of a shtus, and not more at the same time. And this happened over time. Lo yosifu yoser al shtus. And he brings down over here that we find this in the Gemara, that the sages increased the value of a seller from 20 mana to 24 mana, which is exactly a shtus. More than that jump at a time is not allowed. And now you're making the kav mechel shisha. Harashus biyadan yaser al shisha lo yasu. Not less than a 6. We even allow a 6, not more. Halacha yutches hasit and mekaneches midoisov. So when we mentioned that people, the lekech would come with his box, with his bag, with his fed to carry the merchandise. The moicher had in her store, they had these measures. You have to make sure that these measures are fully empty, because even the littlest amount of residue that's stuck to the measure is selling it accurately. So a person who's a wholesale merchant has to be mekanech his measures at least once in 30 days. A balabayis who uses it much less. Achas l'shnei masar chodesh. We're speaking about, even if you wouldn't do it, we're speaking about a mashu, but that's the whole theme of these 2 chapters. That's how much movement. This is pamachas b'Shabbos. He has to be mamacha it. He has to wash it down. Umekaneach, he has to clean down the mosnayim after every single mishkal. But that is not because of the might be residue. Because if you won't have your measures mamish clean, if they're wet, if they're moist, if you live in Miami, they're going to begin to rust. And then you won't know, and it's going to become inaccurate. And no matter how much a chaka Miami, all the chevra went to yeshiva week to Miami. No one is listening. Halacha yutes. Hamabakesh lishkol shloish levi litram. Another gavaldik edim. Listen to this. Look at to the question. A person wants to buy 3/4 of a liter. So now, what are the options? I'll tell you what the options are. We have a weight of a half a liter. We learned that last chapter. We have a weight of a quarter of a liter. A half and a quarter. Push the thing, guys. I have a counterbalance, right? If I put here one stone, whatever they used, one marble stone of a half and another of a quarter, then when I put the meat and its counterbalance, it's a 3/4. You're not allowed to do that. We'll see soon why. So how do you do it? What you do is like this. You put a liter weight in this side. I don't want to buy a liter. I want to buy 3/4. So you know what I do? I put the meat and a quarter of a liter on this side. So it's going to be counterbalanced. Now that stone, the moicher is keeping. We want to make sure that the side that has the weights should not have two, should only have one. Because if there's two, shayach, that one will go missing, b'shoygig, and no one will notice. Nois a liter v'chaf l'zayim. And v'habosar via liter v'chaf sheniya. Beautiful. At least the side of the weights has one. She'im ato oimer noisim chatzi liter v'lia liter, which there were such two stones. V'chaf achas shemo yipol via liter, and the lekeach won't be royeyu. If you have only one stone, if that stone is missing, the whole thing would be lopsided. You'll never. It's not shaykh not to know, not to see. Final halacha atkan is the obligation on the person, and we spoke about in Perek Zayin that I can't even own in my house an inaccurate measure. Me, if unless again, guys, I know that in Brazil, when I was in this world, everyone had a seal on their weights, and the government, when they made inspections, there, if yours at the home doesn't have a seal, you can own it. If they don't have seals, you can't own it. Now there's another responsibility. Chutz of the achrayis of the individual, there is a communal responsibility. Chayavim beis din lahamit shoitrim b'chol medina medina u'b'chol pelach u'pelach shiyu machazren al hanois. Their job will be to go around u'mitzatkin es hamoiznayim ves hamidos. They would make sure that the measures are exact. Now they would make it exact. Sometimes a person b'shoigig, he didn't know it's not exact. And now they had another job, and that is u'poiskin es hasha'adim. Now it's amazing that there's a machlekes amoyroim. The word poiskin es hasha'adim is that they set prices. Shmuel holds, we don't paskin like the Rambam doesn't paskin like Shmuel. Very much the lahavdil, the way the system that we have in America, a free market, that the free market corrects the prices. That means that if I'm going to start charging too much for apples, no one has to correct me because there'll be a competitor that will sell it for cheaper, and the competition keeps the prices. And that's Shita Shmuel. The Rambam paskins, it doesn't work that way. I want to add a nuance, a very important nuance. We have time. It's a very short, becamos inside. And that is that in America, there's like a free market. Al Pidin Torah, there's something called Asagas Gavul. Not Asagas Gavul that we learned in the last chapter, moving a boundary. That means if someone has a market in a certain place, Al Pidin Torah, another Yid cannot open a market there so quickly. The moment you begin restricting others to compete, you have to be now the Beis Din has a bigger achrayis to keep the prices down. It goes together. If anyone can open anything anywhere, then maybe we would like a paskin like Shmuel. Beis Din doesn't have to be poisik the sh'arim. They don't have to make sure that the prices are not being inflated, because if anyone is taking advantage, someone else is gonna what's going beautiful. But since we have a din of Asagas Gavul, it fits. Now, it's not only here in LA, there's so many people, but even here in LA, I know that if the guy is a market on the same block, on the same side, there'll be restrictions.
I would be saying if I listen,
No, Hamon?
I don't be saying, going by the premise of any man of that.
Doesn't matter. So, the paradox is that everyone has a predestined parnasa and no one can take away from the other. Still, there's these dinim. There's many paradoxes in halacha, that's one of them. Okay. It's a stira, I acknowledge. Right. Now, so how do they deal with him? The typical remedy, the therapy of the to beat him up, and or based on now, now that we also speak about inflation, if a person decides to start selling for more expensive, because we don't just tell him lower the price. give him a beating. Beautiful. The last chapter of Hilchos Geneva, God willing, tomorrow we're starting Gezela and Aveda, is about the meaning of Geneva in the Aseres HaDivros, like we began. When the Rambam began Hilchos Geneva, he quotes a pasuk from Parshas Kedosh. Why didn't you call it to Aseres HaDivros? Because the Lo Signoivu does not mean don't steal money, which is also, that's what, there's a special issue on kidnapping, and in certain circumstances, God forbid, that if a person kidnaps, uses that person, and sells that person, it's a capital sin. That when people from ignorance ask, how does the Torah allow slavery? It doesn't. The slavery that the current world is so sensitive to, correctly so, is going to kidnapping people and selling them. It's also in the Aseres HaDivros. It's a capital sin. It's like murdering. The type of avdus that the Torah legislates, limits, is when a person mitzroynai hatoiv sells himself, or like we learned, if a person ganvit and they don't know how to pay back, in certain circumstances he's sold by the base. That's very different, and even that is very limited. It's time, when people begin to say, the Torah at least makes restrictions, you have to honor the slave. That's the wrong answer. That's mamish the wrong answer. No, that's a slave that chose to sell himself. That's very different. Now, there's details, because once a person is an avdus, then the kids are avdus, I know. But the type of slavery that the world is correctly sensitive about, just for us to know, that's also in the Aseres HaDivros. Taking a person against his will and selling him, capital sin. Let's begin. Halach Peri Tesas 13. Halach Al. Kol hagoynei nefesh miYisrael. Just that act before selling him. Just what's in English it's called kidnapping. Oiver b'loisa say shenemar loy signoiv. I'm sorry, not loy signoiv. Loy signoiv. That's Aseres HaDivros. But Aseres HaDivros is Parshas Yisrael and Parshas Va'eschana. Pasuk zeh ha'amur b'Aseres HaDvarim. He has l'goynef nefashos, and not for money. Chein hamoichroi. Another step. Just the act of a sale is also over b'loisaseh. And that's included in the pasuk, lo yimkaru mimkeres of it. Now, the ein loikin al shnei laven elu. Why? Because of a rule, l'pnei shulav sheniten lazoras misas bezdin. Any sin for which it's shaykh to be put to death in a bezdin. We just learned this last week. Even not like loikin u'mishalman, which with Rambam paskins, if you're not loikin, you'll be mishalman. When it comes to a potential misas bezdin, even if in this circumstance you're not chayiv misas bezdin, you're not going to get any other punishment. It's not about the money here; it's about the malchus. And we know what's the punishment for kidnapping and selling. Chenek, halacha base. Now let's go into details. This taka to be punished in a bezdin, betchenek is number one. Yisrael. Number two, v'yach nisenu l'reshus. Like every step is needed. In other words, he was taken out of his reshus, brought into the domain of the ganef, and there was some amount of benefit that the kidnapper had, minimum, but v'yishtamish boy, and then v'yimkerenu la'chedim. And that's the meaning in the pasuk. Kim kiseitze v'hisamer boy. You used him and then you sold him. What's the mashal? He leaned on him. Right? Nishan olav, nismach boy. And even though that the victim doesn't even know what happened, he's sleeping.
When the Romans killed the 10 martyrs and made the example of Yosef, did this follow this sequence of selling?
Yeah, it's not good to be malamut chayvan yidden, but yeah. But we paid so much for this already. Now, if all of these steps happen, but what? Which could happen? The Ganav is still in his own domain. He's butter doesn't mean butter means he won't be killed. Chenek. He bought it. He stole him. He took him out of his house. The nishtamish boy, but he did not sell him, or mecharai prior to him using him. It's one of these steps we're missing. Oy nishtamish boy umecharai, but to one of the relatives of the ganef, he sold him to his father. Oy lo achiv harei zapater. Shenemar goynef nefesh, he took him away from his brothers. tell you that in Brazil, which is a machl over there with kidnappings, it became so out of hand, is that they would call the people, these are gangs, and they would tell them, we are going to kidnap you. Now listen, you can negotiate now and redeem yourself now and don't have a dagmas nefesh. Or, and another thing, in Brazil, at least when I was there, if you were kidnapped once, no one kidnapped you again. That was the understanding. Because it's good for the Ganovim, for these bandits, because ain't no dollar safe. Like, why would a person pay $1 million? They'll be kidnapped again. So it's a Meshuggah world. It's mamish chaos. Okay. So at least over there, I'm saying there was not going if you me'echav. You stayed at home, but you were told that if you're not going to pay the ransom money, then God forbid, there was a Fruma Yid, I remember, that got killed. Terrible tragedy, because they do it for money. But sometimes these are bandits. Sometimes, kidnapped, killed.
Why the family?
Because he saw the kidnappers. They made a mistake. They found out later. They found them later. If the victim is still sleeping, and all of these, that before we learned, if he was mishtamish yashin, the Rambam says it's a problem before. But if every step was done, that means the victim didn't even have the anguish yet, you're not going to be chayv chenek. You violated loy signoi, but you're not going to get the chenek. But look at the rishis. This is the biggest rishoyim, and they sold her only for her children. That means that the ganav is keeping her, but her offsprings will go to someone else. He kidnapped her. Guys, don't worry. The Eibishter is the din v'dayan. This guy Arash Azar Rishis to separate the mother. They makes us based, and we're not getting mistama. Chenek is not enough to punish these people.
He's only part of chenek. Some of those other punishments are mistake.
Well, first of all, God is the ultimate punisher, but the shore society, if something is getting rampant, Beis Din has to do whatever they could to stop these things from happening. Halacha hey, hagoyin if es menoi, oyes achav akoten, chein apitrupes en shagon bu asay yisoyim shmucham etzlam, ubalabai is that ganvins echam mignei beis esmucham al shulchanoi, or malamet tenoy keshagon of echam and aktanam alim dem etzloi. Even if Rahman al-Islam, they used them and sold them, also potter, because the violence, he doesn't feel so violated. It's not as bad as here because he was kidnapped by someone who he knows. Imagine what happens. You're kidnapped by something you don't know.
Then you're sold to someone else.
Yeah, but at least that first step was not as bad. I think it did less.
So,
that you already know that the first step was not such a violation.
there's 4 qualifications here.
Rabbi Zajac is a teacher. I don't know what he's thinking now. Yeah, okay. No, yeah, okay. Allah about the victim's age is irrelevant. I want to add, so I said wrong. I was saying that he feels violated. Or Katan Ben Yoimai doesn't know. So it's not that. The Eibishter's dinner. Oh yeah, I'm going to Katan Ben Yoimai. Only thing is that Ben Yoimai has to be, we know that he's going to live. So either, 30 days, that's when the Torah says you live 30 days, Ben on day 31. Or if you know that he was a full term, and Ben Zachar Ben Akeva. And also the Ganav, this kidnapper, is a ish or yaisha, hare elu meharagin, shenema goynef nefesh mikamok. The echad goynef es yisra, or goynef get, or even meshuchrar, shenema v'nefesh mei echad, ve'elu b'chlal achenu heim b'toyru ha'mitzvahs. Abel ha-goynef es ha'evet, meaning evet kanani. Amisha chetzi echad, or potter, the big Rashaim Gemurim. Not every sin is something that God gave us the obligation to partner with His justice. Whatever we don't do, Hashem is going to do. Halacha zay. Oh, that's the topic here. So now, interesting why it comes in over here, but it comes in over here because it was Geneva. Habama Machteres means a very interesting thing that the word Machteres means a tunnel. It doesn't mean only a tunnel. When you have someone in the process of breaking into your property, that's called the Hababa Machteres. Even in most cases, we'll see the exceptions. He's coming to steal. He knows that there's a little chance. It's called a hat. I forgot the lashon. It happened to us. Terrible thing. Someone broke into a house and we were there. That person knows that could be the owners will be there. And owners freak out. And they are ready to kill the owner if they have to. But they don't want to kill anyone, but they are viewed as a roidif. And habba laharga chahashkem laharga. Habba b'machteres. The point of balayla is that guy broke in at a time. He did the research. These ganovim, they wanted money. They don't want the balabas to be at home, but they know that it could be someone is going to be home. And they're going to kill if they have to, not to be caught. Ein loy damim, the word damim here means blood. Ein loy damim means is that they forfeited their lives. They forfeited their lives. Ella im haroge balabayis, or any other person, they are potter. V'reshus yesh la koil lahargoy bein b'choil bein b'shabbos b'chol misa sheyacholim lahamisa, and that's the meaning of the words damim over here in Parshas Mishpat. He has no blood, means he forfeits his life. Machteres means he's tunneling in the house. You don't tunnel to someone's roof. The concept, what the emphasis will be, you can only kill them when they are in the process of breaking in or while they are in your house. The moment they turned around to leave, at that time, it's only a money thing. You can't kill them. Any type of enclosed area, not even in your house. By the way, we're not saying it's a mitzvah to kill him. Make it clear. But you're allowed to kill him. You're allowed to kill him. You have to also know that your life is at risk. When someone, God forbid, the balabayis' life is at risk. So then, okay, that's why I'm just saying that Rambam doesn't write across the board, go and kill them. Maybe there's a certain every case is a case. But to understand, to take it seriously, that there's a suffix, there's a question whether the guy's going to try to kill you. You know he's coming. The fish, there's a chazaka. Then he's going to react by killing the balabayis. And the nimsa, has a din of a roidef achar chaveda lahargoi, ulafikach yei hareg, ben shaya gadol, ben shaya katan. But you don't say, the Hababa Machteres is a little nothing of a person. He's little. It doesn't take a lot. Ben zachar ben akev.
We don't mention weapons, or if he's coming empty-handed or with.
No, not on the Torah. I would say, Kevan, that if he's coming with a weapon, like Yakir was pointing out, if someone, God forbid, haba lahargacha, not rishus, you're chayiv hashkem b'hargay. Think if someone comes in with a weapon, there's a greater obligation for you to kill him first, because there's a certain amount of your ein loy damim sometimes, but still you can always kill them. Now there's exceptions. The exception will be, look at this natural thing of a father will never kill a son. And Rahman al-Islam, a son can kill the father. Since there's a father won't kill a son, if the father is breaking into the house of the son, if the son will stop his father from gambling, the father's not going to kill him. So therefore he can kill him, but not the other way around. Halacha yud, ho yahad davar barur labalabayis. Shezeh haganev haba'alav won't kill him. And he's only going to come aliske mamin. Then also lahargoy. And if he does kill him, he's called a heidig nefesh. And that's the meaning, guys. It says in the Machteres Yamatzeh Haganef, etc., right? Ein loy damim. And it says ve'im zorcha olav hashemesh damim loy. Guys, damim means bloods. If the sun is shining, then he did not forfeit his life. Sun is shining doesn't mean the sun is shining. You have to know how to read the Torah. If you know, like the day is light. Im zorcha shemesh olav im baru l'cha davar kashemesh. Sheyesh loy shamim imcha. Shalom means he's coming to take your money, but he will never kill you. Al targe, you're not allowed to kill him. Lefikach, a father that God forbid is breaking into his son's house, the son cannot kill the father. But the other way around, if a son is breaking into his father's house, Rahman al-Islam, the type of Rahmanis that a father has in a son, they say in Brazilianish that one father can support 10 sons, and 10 sons cannot support one father. Halacha Yud Aleph. The moment this ganef is on the way out, he didn't even enter your house. But you hear noise. You go see. When you come, the ganef is already running away. The moment you see his back, not his front, that means he's going out. He no longer has a din of an oirif, and now yesh loy damim. He did not forfeit his life. Now, many people are there. When many people are there, right, he knows that he cannot kill the balabais, he'll be overpowered. He knows he's only going to kill, he's not a murderer. He's coming to steal. If the balabais is there, he'll kill him. But if he's going to be overpowered, that's the psychology of this type of ganav. You were hababa machteres. I could have killed you in my house. Yeah, that's when you were in my house. Not now. Ein an erik. And Allah Yud Beis. Like we mentioned, it's not only in a house. Even hadir bahasad. No, it's the guy is staying away from your house. But one thing is the same: that if you will confront him there, it's possible he's going to kill you. I'm sorry, I take back what I said. When it's your house, when it's your roof, when it's your karpet, which is adjacent to your house, he's going to kill you. Outside your property, Yakir. That's the pshat. It's a garden, it's a pen, it's a field. The ganaf won't kill you. That's the way they think. He was so secure that you won't be home, he didn't plan out to kill you. When a guy breaks into a house, on some level, he knows he might be confronted. And the final halacha yud gimel, kol ganev sheyesh loy damim. Any ganev whom we may not kill, yesh loy damim means you may not kill him. Im nafal olav gal b'Shabbos ashlamazal. While he's gambling, the house collapses. Can you go through a gal? The answer is yeah. Even for a suffix, pikuach nefesh. He never lost his life. So mefakrin olav. The im shibar kelim b'bi yasai, another din. He's chayv b'tashlumim kedin kol mazik. Why is that? Because he never forfeited his life. What did we learn, my friends? That you're not chayav life and payment. This we say, God willing, tomorrow.